So while the computer is not acting up, what a great time to do a little bit of this book. Susan Mallery, Happily This Christmas, Happily Incorporated. I'm going to read the back to you, and everybody's probably going, I can't believe she's stopping one book and starting another. I'm not stopping. We're just taking a time out to start this book because I want to finish both of them by Christmas. So there's no place like Happily Incorporated for the holidays. Win Bouchain has a thriving business, a great kid, and mildly embarrassing crush on the guy next door. He's a local cop, Garrick McCabe. She's a strong, independent woman who can't help dreaming about what if with a man she barely knows, until he needs her help. Garrick's pregnant daughter will be home for Christmas, and his house needs a woman's touch. Garrick and his little girl were tight once, and he's hoping for a small-town Christmas will bring her back to him. But thawing his daughter's frosty attitude will take more than a few twinkling lights. Maybe sharing the holiday with Win and her son will remind her of the joy of family. As the season works its magic on these wounded souls, Win realizes it's time to stop punishing herself for a painful secret, while Garrick remains haunted by the ghost of his past mistakes. Will he allow Win to open the only gift she truly wants, his heart? Mallory's new Happily Incorporated series has the author's signature blend of humor, poignancy, and small-town charm, says Booklist. And it is a wonderful story. Hallmark, I know I've said this before, but you've done a movie from one of her books before, and I have it in the front room. I love that movie. I love the book. This would be an excellent movie to book Hallmark. Okay, let's start in here. Chapter 1. Annoying other people was one thing. Win Bouchain completely get behind that idea, mostly because more often than not, people deserve to be annoyed. But annoyed herself? What was up with that? Not only was it a total waste of time and made no sense, the only solution was to stop acting like a 16-year-old girl with a crush on a quarterback. She was a mature adult, a single mother with a successful business life, and that she really liked. She needed to be if she attracted her handsome neighbor, she would need to stop hanging out by the front window of her house, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. She should march right over to his place and knock on the front door and say, I'm an idiot. She muttered out loud, not for the first time. No matter how she envisioned that march over there scenario, she couldn't figure out what she was supposed to say when he opened the door. Hi, Garrick. I was wondering if maybe we could, go out sometime? Really, that was how she was going to start the conversation. Shouldn't she lead into maybe mention she enjoyed having him as her neighbor for the past year and tell him how nice it was that he was a police officer and that the whole street liked the fact that he parked his patrol car in the driveway? Not that crime was a problem in Happily Incorporated, because it wasn't. But still, having a cop as a neighbor was great, although the interest was more than personal. What was with how he looked over the summer mowing his lawn, shirtless. Not that she hadn't noticed him before. She had, until the lawn mowing season. She had managed to ignore him, but now she just couldn't, and that was already November, and she'd done absolutely nothing to take their non-relationship past the waving and hieing stage. And here she was, hanging out by her front window, and she was ready to slap herself upside the head. It was the dating thing. She wasn't good at it because she didn't do it very often. There were a lot of reasons, very few of them interesting, but in the past 5 or 6 months she'd been thinking that maybe it was time to do the no dating rule and go have a personal life. But while she'd spent a lot of time thinking, she hadn't been done much time on the doing front. I'm better than this, she muttered, ignoring the little voice in her head, whispering that she obviously wasn't. It was just in the every other area of her life that she was capable. Hunter, her 14-year-old, acting out in school. She could deal with that. 5 ways to Sunday. A printing order gone awry at work. Easy peasy. A friend with an emotional crisis. She was all about hugging and straight talk, but when it came to dating or wanting to date, or thinking Garrett was sexy and super sweet with her son, and lately she'd been wanting them to get to know each other better, she was a mess. Worse than a mess. She was pathetic. As proof, she was standing in her living room, looking out the picture window, staring at his house, waiting for him to get home. It was Saturday afternoon. She has a lot of things she should be doing, and none of them included staring at some guy's empty driveway. If only there was something about him, but there was, not just a whole tall with broad shoulder thing, although that was very nice, as were his gray eyes and dark hair, but what really got her attention was more than the fact that Garrick was always friendly and pleasant. There was a hint of something dark and dangerous lurking beneath the surface. Ridiculous, but true. And like most reasonably intelligent women who knew better, she just couldn't help responding to the possibility of a great guy who just might have a whisper of a dangerous streak. She turned away from the window just in time to hear a dinging sound after she walked into the kitchen and pulled out 2 cookie sheets out of the oven, because she'd made chocolate chip cookies, if you could believe it. Things were that bad. Oh, not the baking. She baked all the time for Hunter, and most likely she would pretend that she made those for her son as well, only she hadn't. She baked them thinking that she would take them over to Garrick, in a neighborly kind of gesture. That, hopefully, would lead to some witty conversation, lots of laughter, and him confessing that he spent the past few months wanting to ask her out. It was a lot of pressure to put on a chocolate chip cookie. She slid in more 2 cookie sheets, reset the timer, and nearly moved all the baking cookies to the cooling rack when the doorbell rang. Wynne walked through the living room, opened the front door to find Garrick on her front porch. That was page 9, 10, 11, and here comes 12. I'll probably take you up to page 18 tonight. He wasn't in uniform. Instead, he had on jeans, a t-shirt. As usual, his mouth was curved up in a smile that left her a little breathless. "Hi, Wynne," he said. His voice was low and sexy, although that could have been wishful thinking on her part. "Do you have a second?" "Sure." She stepped back to let him in, wondered what on earth was happening. She'd just been thinking about him, and here he was. Weirder still, even though they'd been neighbors for a year, they never exchanged much more than a passing few comments, greeting each other and mentioning the weather. They certainly never been in each other's houses. "I'm baking cookies, and I need to get them on the cooling rack," she said, leading him into the kitchen. "What's up?" "I need your advice." "Sure, I'm good at giving advice." She glanced at him, and he slid onto one of the stools at the island in the center of the kitchen. "People are less than good about taking it." "Tell me about it." He eyed the cookies. "May I?" "Help yourself, but be careful. They're hot." He took one and blew on it before taking a bite, his eyes half closed as he chewed. "Perfect," he told her, looking at her. "You are a great cook." "Thanks." Despite the relatively ordinary conversation, everything about the moment was surreal. Him sitting in her kitchen, them taking all of it. Not that she minded his presence. Her kitchen didn't host many men, not counting service guys doing things like fixing the dishwasher and clogging the sink, and the change was nice. Plus, she couldn't help feeling that she was being the perfect opportunity to try one of the conversational threads she'd been practicing, where she mentioned them maybe possibly going out sometime. Joe Lynn's coming home. Joe Lynn's going to be moving in with me," he said, taking a second cookie. "It's going to be a new experience for me." He glanced at her. "We've never lived together before, not full time. There have been plenty of weekends and vacation, but this will be different. I want to make sure that the house is comfortable for her." "Jolyn? Who is Jolyn, and why is she moving in?" Even as the questions were forming and an obvious answer popped into her rattled brain, he had a girlfriend. Of course he did. She'd been telling herself for 2 years that after her last relationship ended, she was ready to find someone new, and Garrick was about to have Jolyn move in. How perfect. "I think I have the right furniture," he said. "It's other the stuff that I need help with, making the house seem—" He paused as if searching for the right word. "Cozy." Her mind went blank, totally, completely blank. Cozy? Had he really just said that word? It didn't feel like it was Garrick-like, but then what did she know about anything? She never even suspected there was a Jolyn, which pretty much confirmed her whole being of an idiot thing. "I want the house nice when she arrives," he continued. "She's having a rough time of it, what with her being pregnant and all. If she was older, it might be easier, but she's only 21 and—" "Jolyn is 21 and pregnant?" Wynne asked. Her voice was a little more shrill than it should have been. Because him having a girlfriend wasn't enough of a hit, she thought grimly. "Sure, make it a toddler and then pregnant." "What were you thinking? She's way too young to be your girlfriend. How did you even meet? Were you hanging out at high school, hoping to get lucky?" So much for her Garrick daydreams, she thought, wishing she hadn't been stupid enough to believe that he was crushworthy. Yuck, and double yuck. To think that she wasted all this time thinking about him. No more sexy, possibility dangerous neighbors for her. That was for sure. She was going to go find a non-sexy, undangerous guy to fall for. She glared at Garrick, wishing she were physically strong enough to drag him to the door and throw him out. He was. "My girlfriend?" Garrick's voice was nearly a yelp. "She's my daughter." They stared at each other. Wynne had a feeling she looked as shocked as he did. On the heels of that revelation came the admission that she really had to start thinking of before she spoke, and maybe not to be so hasty about assuming the worst. "Oh," she said, managed just as the timer dinged. She busied herself removing the cookie sheets from the oven and setting them on the stove, and then turned off the oven. She put down the hot pads and then drew in a breath and looked at Garrick. "We probably should start over," she murmured. "You thought I had a pregnant 21-year-old girlfriend? Wouldn't that make me a jerk?" While she wanted to say that it would, she wasn't sure that it was a good idea. "I'll admit to some disappointment," she said instead. "I would hope so. I'm 38. I don't want to date someone in their 20s. What would we talk about? Some guys aren't interested in conversation. That's not me." They stared at each other. Despite her embarrassment and a sizable dose of chagrin, she found herself noticing that he really had attractive eyes. That was 12, 13, here's 14 and 15. Not the unusual gray coloring, but with shape. They suited his face and, well, the rest of him. Without wanting to, she remembered the interesting scars on his torso. Not that she'd been looking. He was also the one who had chosen to mow his lawn shirtless that previous summer. She had no idea where the scars come from. If she had to guess, she would probably have been in more than one knife fight. But that wasn't possible. The man was a police officer and happily incorporated. Guys who did that didn't fight with knives. She put the rest of the cookies into the cooling racks, poured 2 glasses of milk, took the stool on the other counter, on the other island, and reached for a cookie. "Hello," she said. "I'm Win Bouchain, your neighbor. We don't usually say much more than hi and talk about the weather." Garrick smiled. "Hi, Win. I'm Garrick McCabe. I grew up here in Appley Incorporated and had my daughter when I was 17. I moved to Phoenix when I started college, mostly because Jolynn and her mom was there. I got on the Phoenix police force. When Jolynn went off to college a few years back, I returned to Happily Incorporated. Last year I bought the house next door. We all appreciate having your patrol car parked in the driveway." "I'm glad." He grabbed another cookie. "My adult daughter is married to a deployed Marine. Her mom has 3 boys at home and is getting to be a bit much for Jolynn, who's due in about 8 weeks, so right around Christmas. Alicia, Jolynn's mother, thought it would be a good idea for Jolynn to stay with me until Christmas or until Chandler, Jolynn's husband, comes home, whichever happens first." That was page 15. Here comes 16 and 17 and 18. "I'm glad she's going to be with family during the holidays." "Me too." The smile faded. "Jolynn and I went through a rough patch when she was about 15. We used to be close, and then one day she just didn't want her dad around. I'm hoping to see her time with me to reconnect." One shoulder rose and lowered. "To that end, I want the house to be comfortable for her." "Cozy?" she asked, her voice teasing. His smile returned, which made her unexpectedly happy. "That would be it. I don't know anything about decorating or plants, and I don't cook. Her being pregnant adds stakes to the game for sure. That's why I want your help. I've seen your graphic work around town, and it's always right for whatever business it is. The colors, the tone, all of it. You're a real professional. You have excellent taste and style. I was hoping to get your advice about what I should have around." He waved his hand. "Maybe some more dishes and pillows and stuff." That was a lot of information to process, she thought, slightly off balance from the unexpected compliment. She always worked hard to please her clients, and she was happy to know her work was appreciated, but it was strange to consider that Garrick would look at a sign in a window and think of her. Did he think of her in another way, or was that the hoping a little bit too much? Regardless, she liked that he cared about his kid and that he wanted to make his house nice for her. She also felt bad about assuming the worst about him, so even if she hadn't been inclined to help, which she was, what would she have pushed her over the edge? "I'll give you whatever advice you like," she told him, "but my style might not be hers. That could be a problem." "No, you and Jolynn have a lot in common design-wise. You have good eye for space and color, and she would like what you do." His words made her feel a little floaty, which was silly. She was in some serious trouble here. She hadn't been this flaky even in high school. If she wasn't careful, she was going to start flipping her hair and saying "like" in every sentence. If you're all right with me adding fringe to every surface in your house, then I'm in," she told him. He chuckled. "Fringe would be a look." "But not a good one," she teased. "I'm not a fringe kind of guy." "Good to know. Tell me about Jolynn." Something flashed through his eyes. "I don't see her much anymore. In fact, I haven't seen her since the wedding. Like I said, we used to be tight." One corner of his mouth turned up. "She was my best girl. I'm sorry that changed." "Me too." He was silent for a second, then drew in a breath. "As I said, she's married to Chandler, who is currently deployed. Alicia says he'll be back before the baby's born because first babies are always late." He shook his head. "I can't believe my little girl's going to be a mother. It all happened so fast." "Children grow up even when we don't want them to. I'm figuring that out with Hunter. He's a good kid." "Thanks, I like to think so." She wrapped her hand around the glass of milk. "I'm happy to help with whatever you need, and I'm sorry for jumping to conclusions." "Thank you for the offer. As for the rest of it, I can see why you would think that, what you did. In my own defense, I'll admit, it never occurred to me, with all that you wouldn't know about my daughter, with what Happily Incorporated being a small town and all." This might shock you, Garrick, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about you." He stared at her in mock surprise. "Now you're just being mean." She laughed. "We have our own lives we discuss, but hey, it's me." They smiled at each other. Wynne wondered if there was a way to ask about any other woman that might be in his life, but she figured she shouldn't press her luck. She was going to help her neighbor, and in helping, she might get a chance to probe into his personal life. If he was single, she would try to find a way to suggest they go out to dinner and get to know each other. Of course, the more likely scenario was that they spent some time together, and then she discovered he was annoying. Because that seemed to happen a lot. Her friends said she was too picky, while she thought of herself as careful. "When is she going to move in with you?" she asked. "Next Saturday." "Then we should probably take a look at your house and make a plan. When's a good time?" he asked. "I'm free now." That's 16, 17, and 18. Let's see if the next part is just a small paragraph. Oh, the next part is what drew me into this book. Page 39. "Captain, do you have a second? This is Garrick at work." Garrick looked up from his computer and he saw Phillips, a relatively new officer, hovering outside his office. He waved the younger man in and saved the email he'd been working on. His recent promotion had come with a lot of paperwork and responsibility. He disliked the former, enjoyed the latter, and knew that if all went according to plan, they both were going to increase. After he returned from his last task force assignment in Colombia, he'd taken a few weeks to clear his head. He wasn't going to say he had anything like PTSD, but the weeks of being held hostage by an angry, vicious drug lord had left a few scars, some physical, some less visible. His job in Phoenix had been waiting for him, but Garrick had felt like he wanted some kind of change. The call from Frank Dinnan, known to all in Happily Incorporated as Grandpa Frank, had offered an unexpected career path. The current chief of police was looking to retire in a few years, and the town wanted to hire an heir apparent. Garrick was known in entity with a right skill set. He'd been recommended by his boss in Phoenix for the task force commander. 3 regular-length interviews and 1 2-day-long interview later, he'd been hired and moved back to his hometown. He'd come in as sergeant and had been promoted to captain about 6 months ago. His, quote, career development plan, end quote, included him getting more involved with the community outreach, including the city council and governing boards. Page 40. He wasn't excited about the politics in the position, but understood that a part of good policing was understanding how government worked and knowing his department's place in the overall structure of the town. He's just wrapped up in an online college course on the city management. Last year, he studied human resources as it related to law enforcement, and he still had 3 or 4 more year courses he wanted to take, so much for his homework days being behind him. He motioned to the chair next to his desk and waited until the young officer took a seat before asking, "What's up?" Phillips was a good kid, maybe 25 or 26, married with a 2-year-old. He had a 4-year degree in criminal justice. A year into law school, he decided to become a cop instead. He was a decent officer, a little impatient, but that came with his age. He was well liked and had no trouble working with his female bosses. That was one of Garrick's tests of new recruits: have them to report to a woman. New hires tended to come to the job either cautious and willing to learn or arrogant as hell. Garrick wanted to weed out the jerks as quickly as possible. Happily Incorporated wasn't a big metropolitan area. The force was meant to be a part of the community, not an adversary. Phillips had done well with everyone he worked with. The only negative report were that he kept to himself a little more than was socially acceptable for such a close-knit group. Phillips glanced at his hands, then at Garrick. He cleared his throat. "I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be moving out of my house. I'll be staying with a friend for a few weeks. Things are getting straightened out at home." Garrick's radar lit up and his body tensed. Trouble on the home front was never good, but in a kid this young, with a baby, it could be a disaster. He got up and closed the door, then he resumed his seat. "I'm sorry to hear that. What seems to be the problem?" Phillips looked startled by the question. "Just some personal stuff." Garrick waited. Phillips had come to him. He could have moved out without saying anything, but he hadn't, which led Garrick to believe he wanted advice rather than to make an announcement. "Angie's being so difficult," he said, his jaw tightening as he spoke. "When I get home from work, I'm tired. All she wants me to do is talk to me. I need time to unwind, but I don't get a second. She's always asking me questions and want me to take care of the baby. It's not that I don't love her and Bailey. It's just I can't be her entertainment every second I'm not working. She's complaining we're not going to have any family with us for Thanksgiving. It will just be the 3 of us." He looked away. "Maybe marrying her was a mistake. It's just too much." Garrick took in the information, trying to decide how to handle the situation. With some men, it helped to berate them into seeing sense. Others need to be led to see the truth. You and Angie moved here from where? He asked. New Mexico. That's a long way from home. Does she have a big family there? Phillips nodded. A couple of sisters or folks, all her friends. She was a nurse there, but with Bailey and all, she hasn't had time to get her license here. Garrick leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed. You moved your wife away from her family, her home, and her job, to a town where she doesn't know anyone. She's caring for your daughter 24 hours a day, and when you get home she wants to have a conversation with you, and you take part in raising that child that is half yours, and at the same time you have a new career that is interesting and meets all your social needs. You're going and doing all day long, so much so that when you pull into the driveway, you just want to be left alone. Do I have that right, Phillips? The officer flushed. It's not like that. Isn't it? Tell me what I got wrong. She wanted to come here, too. It wasn't my decision. And why is that? To further her own career? Phillips looked away. To help me with mine. Do you love her? Phillips pulled back his head to stare at Garrick. What? Do you still love your wife? Of course I do. It's just... Garrick held up a hand. No. Whatever you're going to say, don't. It'll only make you look bad. He leaned in close. Here's the thing. You're an idiot. You're married to a smart woman who has a great career. She gave that up for you. She moved to a strange place where she has absolutely no support system for you. The way I see it, the woman gave up pretty much all she had, and here you are complaining like a little boy. I'm not complaining. Garrick let the words hang there for a second before speaking. Don't move out like some indecisive whiner. Man up or let her go. Philip's eyes widened. Let her go? You mean divorce her? Why not? It would solve all your problems. She could move back home and be with her people who actually love her. You won't have to deal with your wife and kid. Didn't you just tell me getting married was a mistake? So undo it. Sure, your daughter will grow up without you, but hey, that's the price of freedom, right? Besides, if Angie is all you say she is, she won't be single long. Bailey will have a new dad, and you won't have to worry about her at all. Page 39, 40, 41, 42. This is 43. Phillips balled his hands into fists. Sir, I don't want a divorce. I don't want her leaving. Why would you say that? I think the bigger question is, why aren't you on your knees every damn day saying a prayer of gratitude that you have a woman willing to do what she did for you? A woman raising your kid, taking care of everything while you live out your dream job. She wants to talk, then you talk. She wants you to take care of your daughter. You say thank you for the privilege of spending time with the most amazing human being you've had the good fortune to have in your life. Give Angie flowers, hire a babysitter and take her out to dinner. Talk to her, some of the guys you work with, and find out who would like to have you three with them for Thanksgiving. I'd say invite them to your place, but that's just more work for your wife. Take time off work so Angie can do what she needs to do to be licensed in California. Make this right, Phillips, or I will start to think you're not the man I thought you were. Garrick waited, not sure if he'd gone too far or not. He knew that a few of his HR professors wouldn't approve of his style, but he was okay with that. He had a feeling that Phillips didn't want a divorce. He just needed to see what so blithering tossing in the trash. And if Garrick was wrong, well, he would deal with that too. Phillips stared up at him. I screwed up with her, haven't I? I messed everything up and made her feel awful. You're right. She's been so great this whole time. I know she's lonely. Anyone would be. I have to do better. Tears filled his eyes. I don't want to lose her. I don't want her to leave me. Garrick pointed to the door. Then go fix this. Take the rest of the day off and make things right with your wife. I'll see you tomorrow, Phillips. The kid nodded as he sprang to his feet, ran to the door. Thanks, Captain. Garrick nodded and watched him go. Hopefully the situation would work out between them. Thinking about Phillips and his wife made Garrick feel old and maybe a little broken. It was easy to give someone else advice, but much harder to know what to do yourself. He'd screwed things up with his daughter, and he still had no idea what had gone wrong. His marriage to Sandy had failed, although there it was easier to see how things had turned and why they didn't make it. As for Rain, he drew a breath, determined not to get caught up in the past again. It was done, and there was no do-over allowed. Knowing that what he knew now, he would have walked away as soon as he figured out the truth. Assignment be damned. But he hadn't had the benefit of foresight, so he gone on thinking he could handle it, that somehow he would keep it from all being a disaster. Then she died. She died because she'd broken the rules. Their undercover fake relationship was never supposed to be more than the means to an end. They weren't supposed to cross that line, and while he hadn't, she had, and in the end, paid with her life. And that's page 44, and we'll stop there to get a good start on Happily This Christmas. What will happen when Jolene moves in with her father, Garrick? And will Win and Hunter's relationship, that's Win and her son Hunter, be okay, or will they have some up and downs? But most importantly, will Win and Garrick get together? All this and more. Stay tuned for more moments of Happily This Christmas by Susan Mallery.